This is part 9 of the Neurips discussion. It's going to be the last discussion of Neurips 2023. I'm going to have a formal discussion of the whole conference after this, but this is still just a paper discussion, so I'm going to focus on the papers. So again, part 9, we're going to discuss 5 papers. First paper, Learning to Influence Human Behavior with Offline Reinforcement Learning in a Collaborative Game. You take the other agent's latent strategy into account when updating your own policy. So the idea of this paper is that robots can learn from other robots how to influence those robots. And I think, to me, this is a massive, massive idea because, of course, this is just the beginning. A one-on-one collaboration can go into one-on-n collaboration, and then we're sort of getting to problems such as, self-driving, autonomous driving, or even the flight problems that we discussed months ago, one of the Stanford seminars, where one of the guest lecturers spoke about how to organize, flight traffic control in a reinforcement learning setting. I think in general, what I find interesting here is that you have sort of the idea of control theory came actually from, a lot of it came from aerospace, and now we could have reinforcement learning in the same context. So this is really interesting. Second paper, COG, connecting new skills to past experience. This is really, you want to convey experience to the robot. How do you do that? You use offline reinforcement learning to have some representation of skills that can be used if the robot decides to solve a certain problem, which goes again towards the idea of, in my opinion, the definition of creativity is if a machine can decide its own problems, and intelligence would be the ability to solve those problems. Third paper, HIQL, offline goal conditioned reinforcement learning with latent states as actions extract value functions from observed states and thus create a latent representation of subgoals. So just observe stuff and then extract the value function from there, which there's another paper which sort of approaches the problem in a similar way. Like, think about it, like you have YouTube video, can you take advantage of YouTube videos? I guess that's the idea. If you go back to the beginning of everything with Fei Li's ImageNet, what did she do? She took advantage of internet pictures to classify pictures and prove the neural nets can do that. Now we have a similar situation, but with videos. And what's important about videos is, again, we have actions here. We have action, skills, and tasks in one thing. That's what a video is. If you see a child running, if you see a person skiing, if you see a car driving, if you see a lion catching an antelope, those are all actions, skills, and problems that are solved. So can we take advantage of that? And this paper tries to do that in sort of a hierarchical way. Fourth paper, grounded decoding, guiding text generation with grounded models for embodied agents. In this paper, what the authors are doing is using large language models or transformer technology to give to ground the robot in affordances, which means that they're giving the robot not just semantic context, which means, go over there and grab the broom and clean the floor. That would be semantic context. And affordance is, okay, can that actually does the robot have the ability to go from A to B, to grab something and to mop the floor? And that is, it's done actually in very simple ways. Think about it like you have the semantic representation of the world, which is at this point, I think, pretty well captured in large language models. But we also have a physical representation of the world in a latent space that tells the robot whether it has the ability to walk, whether it has the ability to grab and mop, and so on and so forth. And then we have a joint probability which says, okay, go over there, and then jointly also, can I do this? And if so, then it does it, and if not, it wouldn't do it. So in that sense, what this paper is doing is grounding the robot literally in physics space. Fifth and last paper to discuss learning inverse process via text-guided video generation. Now, this is the last paper I'm discussing in Neurips 23, and I think it's most exciting paper I've come across, because what the authors here are doing is, in a sense, what I'm dreaming of, which is they're using YouTube to train a video diffusion model. They're using then this video diffusion model with text prompts and instructions to generate a video with a specific task. Kick the ball, do this, do that. Arrange blocks by color. And then they use inverse modeling to extract kinematics and other actuator information to train the robot to do this. So this is really my dream, which is that we can solve the robotics problem through simulation. And the way we can do that is by generating video and model the video in AI. So this is the key. The reason animation doesn't work is right now is because it has to be explicitly programmed. And to paraphrase Elon Musk or people from DeepMind, they would all agree that you can't replicate reality. However, if you have AI at your disposal, if you have almost close to infinite iterations at your disposal, you could potentially simulate reality sort of in the Monte Carlo context, which means that you could say, look, arrange those blocks by color, and you could have Hilbert space type iterations of those blocks and the surroundings and the table. You could have Harry Potter universes where if you put two blocks on top of each other, a third block pops out from nowhere. Like, you could have almost anything which is allowed under the laws of physics happening, and then train the robot based on all these things. And then the robot really is trained to deal with our reality. So this is my idea, and I think this paper is the first time I've seen an academic paper actually doing this. So I'm really, really excited. This is not even on podcast. It's February 1st, 2024. This is Crindelco. For the day, we're down 2%. The market is down 30 basis points. For the year, we are down 20.6%. The market is up 3%. We're underperforming by 23.6%. So this is Neurips, part 9, discussing 5 papers. We're going to start with the first paper, Learning to Influence Human Behavior with Offline Reinforcement Learning. So the fundamental idea here is this is a collaborative game, and you want to act, you have your typical reinforcement learning problem, which is the agent is facing nature and is acting and then recursively adapting its action based on what it expects to yield in terms of rewards going forward, and then hopefully over time choosing the best actions to complete the task. What we're adding here is a second layer. It's another agent, and that other agent's actions, and that's where this collaboration comes in. So the agent A, which is the ego, me, I'm not just learning my own actions, I'm also incorporating my other partner's actions into my Q-learning function. Whether I use Q-learning, model, off-model, online, or offline reinforcement learning, that's a whole different question. In this particular case, they're using offline reinforcement learning to train the ego agent based on the other agent's behavior. I think the technical details of this paper are pretty complicated, and I don't want to discuss them too narrowly here, but I think what's really exciting to me here is, first, the idea itself. This is typical, you just state the problem first, and the problem is, okay, if I act in the world, I might be able to extract more useful information by collaborating with another agent. And then if I extract this from one agent to n agents, then I could be in a, let's say, self-driving scenario, for example, or I could be in a humanoid robot scenario where my actions also impact the other robot's actions, and that to me is incredibly useful for all kinds of strategies. So think about the Optimus robot going around other people, influencing those people by recursively updating its own actions based on what it's learned from how the other people behave around the robot, and then nudging the people around him to do things that might be beneficial for the actual execution of the task. So the example is, let's say you're stacking stuff, the people around you are stacking stuff too, but you're kind of realizing that maybe it's better if you stack just 2 shelves and let the people stack the other, and or do 3 shelves and maybe only 2 people. So you could then start nudging other people to do other things, something along those lines. Task completion results. So it's something along those lines. I think the authors in the paper use a different example. It's the one with cleaning the kitchen and sorting, let's say, sorting plates and things like that. So you could imagine a scenario like that, in with real humans also. And like we humans, we try to nudge our collaborators to get maybe work done better or worse. The same way robots could do that. So this is, I think that, and if you think about this in the multiplayer game scenario, you're getting to problems that we discussed in seminars recently. For example, multi-agent behavior in traffic, multi-agent behavior in air traffic. Control theory actually was born in air traffic control. I think that's where a lot of the control theory that we're using today was developed, and you could see how this is now translating into sort of the control theory 2.0. I think really interesting. The second paper, COG, connecting new skills to past experiences with offline reinforcement learning. Now the fundamental idea here is that you have an agent that learns, let's say, how to pick stuff from a drawer. But if the robot has never seen somebody open a drawer, then its Q-learning function will not incorporate that, and therefore the robot might not be able to even solve the problem, or at least it might not be able to identify the necessity to opening a drawer. However, if in an offline reinforcement learning set, the robot has in its memory somehow seen somebody opening a drawer in a whole different context. It doesn't have to be in the context of the kitchen and grabbing a fork, which might be the exact task that we're dealing with right now. But it's seen somebody else open a drawer and pick up, let's say, a piece of clothing. It could incorporate that into its Q function. And even if it's only a small probability, it could then be nudged towards a higher and higher probability and get it done. So to me, this is really sort of this is a Trojan horse of entering experience into the memory set of the robot through offline reinforcement learning. And I think this is also the beginning of the big sort of the David Deutsch definition of creativity, which I don't think he stated it officially, but in my opinion, this is what he means. Creativity is when you're able to identify your own problems. This is the sort of the Robinson Crusoe scenario, right? How can a robot be dropped on an island and then 2 years later you come back and the robot is surviving by, having some sort of energy source for its battery. It's built a shelter to protect its battery from sun. It's maybe even been able to, you create some sort of solar panel. I don't know. Like imagine a robot like that. Now a robot like that is able to define its own problems, and then the intelligence part of that would be to solve them. Or in other words, well, if I know I need a solar panel, that's creativity, but how do I make it that, let's say that's intelligence. And this paper is, of course, a very baby step, but it's the first step towards that solution by giving the robot a vast amount of experience to offline reinforcement learning. Don't forget, why is offline reinforcement learning so important? It's simply because we have a lot of data. For example, we have video data, we have data like to paraphrase Sergey Levin, we have people what do people describe in terms of drugs for diabetes patients? How do train pilots drive a train? All of this is offline reinforcement learning. And again, it doesn't have to be task specific. There is a potential that a robot can learn how to survive on a deserted island if somewhere in its memory set it has actions that a robot that a train pilot has taken while conducting a train. I can't think of it right now on top of my head, but again, take the drawer example. I think it's a beautiful demonstration of what we're talking about here. So the task, let's say the robot task is go pick up a fork and bring it to the guest. And if the robot has never seen somebody open a drawer, whether it's to pick up a fork or pick up anything, then it's going to be very difficult for, in sort of the Q-learning context, for the robot to have opening a drawer as even an option. So it might then, just go around, maybe figure out a way to get to that fork by opening the drawer, but it could take a long time, or it could never even happen. Or maybe if we have stochastic exploration, it could just randomly open the drawer. However, if it's seen if we train it with offline reinforcement learning, in other words, there is somewhere in the memory set, in the memory, there's an action set which is opening a drawer. It could have a very small non-zero probability attached to opening a drawer, which then could be related to the fact that, well, maybe something's in the drawer, and then the Q function starts adding more and more potential rewards, and then lo and behold, the robot actually goes, opens the drawer, and gets the fork and gets it done. So this is the idea: add experience to the robot. Basically, this is akin to giving the robot experience, and it's also, I think, a first step towards this canonical problem, in my opinion, canonical robot problem, which is how can we build a machine that is able to define its own problems? Well, for that, first it has to have some sort of experience. It has to have something to draw from when it says, okay, this is a problem. And this, again, this paper is sort of the beginning of this really interesting path. The next paper is trying to use video data to define subgoals. That's the idea. The idea here is subgoals. So in a sparse reward environment, we need to somehow guide the robot towards executing the task. Sparse reward means, let's say, I give the robot the task to clean my kitchen. That's a sparse reward task, because cleaning the kitchen gives you a reward of 1, but everything else is still 0, and therefore the robot can wander around, and it doesn't get enough clues or information or nudging towards getting the task done. So how do I do subgoals? That's a fundamental problem in reinforcement learning, of course, and this paper attempts to solve that by, what they do is use image data for offline reinforcement learning, extract value functions from behavior, and then extract actions from value functions. So it trains the robot on, again, many video, like we have this pattern here in this particular discussion of Neurips, which is video data. How can we take advantage of video data? And I think the really great idea here is that because we have video data, first it's available, we don't have to actually generate it. In fact, sooner, one of the papers actually is generating the video data, but again, here we're just using regular video data. We're just using what's available online. And we look at, like, people, let's say, people, robots, cars, whatever, they do all kinds of things. And from that video data, we extract value functions. So we can, for example, extract that when we see a robot or a person cleaning a room, that that particular action gets a very high value in the context of a task, which is cleaning the room. But what's more important, now we also extract actions from that video, like what does it take to get to that high value outcome where I clean the room, which is I have to walk over there, pick up a broom, mop the floor, clean the dishes, etc., etc. So that's the idea here, and we have a sort of a hierarchy here of sort of high level, okay, go do this, this, and that, and then the low level, which is this extraction of actions from the observed behavior. That's the key. Okay, what's the robot actually supposed to do? It's supposed to go over there, pick up the broom, and then we could add the grounding, which is the next paper we're going to discuss. We could also ground the robot in, okay, what are you actually, what's your affordance function? Okay, what can you actually do? Which is incredibly important also. It's interesting how when you're in robotics, you get to this point where you realize that a lot of things are taken for granted. You know, oh well, go over there and pick up the broom. Well, you might have trained, like if you do this task-specific training, like robots are being trained, have been being trained so far, which is okay. It knows how to grab stuff. It knows how to walk. It knows, oh, but I forgot to teach it how to open a drawer, and the whole thing falls apart. So clearly, you have to have some or other representation of skills, of know-how, of task-specific actions. All of that has to be available, and I think that's why we are so excited about foundation models for embodied decision-making agents, because in our opinion, the same way that we had the problem in natural language processing, which was, okay, look, we can't take into account all kinds of potentialities when we have a when we have an agent interacting with a human. Let's say, you know, if you interact with your insurance company, you can't just possibly think of all the potential interactions. But transformer technology and this self-attention mechanism within the transformer technology has really brought us a big leap forward into generalizing to the point where we can anticipate a lot of different interactions. And the same idea now applies to robotics, and all these papers that I'm discussing in this particular episode are in the same realm here. They are, the idea here is, how can we generalize enough to make sure the robot gets a task done, can get it done, and also maybe realizes what needs to be done to be able to execute tasks, which was the COG, connecting new skills to past experiences with online reinforcement learning. That paper takes that into account, brings in the experience. So I guess to sort of summarize so far, what we've discussed here is really, okay, how can we bring experience to the robot, and how can we ground it in reality, which would be the next paper, grounded decoding, guiding text generation with grounded models for embodied agents. Use LLMs for high level and grounding the robot in affordances. What can the robot actually do? So this is what I just mentioned in terms of grounding. So think about it this way, like the goal here is to make sure that the robot has a high level understanding. Let's say it learns from video, right? It has a high level understanding of what it means to grab a broom, but it also has a low level understanding. In fact, with its own actuators, with its own kinetics and all the real physics that it has an understanding of what it can do. And then there's a joint probability, which could be encoded in some sort of, let's say, one hot vector, that maximizes the likelihood that it does a certain action that not just is according to the task specification, but it's also something that it can actually do. So this is the idea of this paper, grounding to the point where it can execute a task based on what it can actually do. That's what the affordance function takes into account. The grounded decoding paper, by the way, it's a sequence to the SECAM paper, which is basically do what you can, not what you say, which I think came from DeepMind. So what's the evolution here is that SECAM has a sort of predefined primitives of skills that the robot has, and then there are text-based instructions, and then the robot takes joint probabilities of the predefined primitives and the text-based instructions and executes. So this is still sort of, think of it like more like a supervised learning method, right? You're supervising the robot. You're telling it, okay, based on what you know, this is what you can do. This grounded decoding paper is the next evolution here. It's sort of a more neural net type or deep learning type approach, which is, I'm not going to predefine. There's no primitives here. The robot Tie kaitat. Kannst du mir, sorry, kannst du mir aufmachen? Das? Mach ich raus, go spazieren.
Ist so gut von der Weg nicht.
Ich gehe nur also innen, ich gehe nicht raus. Ja, fragen einfach so ein bisschen im Gang, dass er ein bisschen die Tapeten wechselt. Danke. Okay.
Viel Spaß.
Danke. Look. Ja? Siehst du? Wie geht's? Wie geht's? Cosette. Und wo ist der Kai? Der Kai. Morgen. Moja mama. Na, gdje je moja mama? A znaš gdje ti je žena? Znaš gdje ti je žena? A gdje je moj otac? Znaš gdje je moj otac? Humans couldn't potentially envision all the possible environments that let's say a robot can face. However, in this video diffusion model world, we can, because now we're exposed to Moore's law. That's it. We don't have humans generating billions of videos. That would be way too expensive. We can have a prompt, which is a robot is supposed to clean a kitchen. And then there's a billion versions of that kitchen with all kinds of things happening, earthquakes, things falling down, the robot hitting somebody, killing somebody, almost killing somebody, whatever, people coming in, people not coming in. The key is iteration here. And once we have many, many iterated videos, now we do what's called inverse modeling. We take from those videos, we extract the actuator information that's necessary for the robot to actually execute that task. So we start with modeling the world through video diffusion. Then we train the robot based on what it sees. We extract actuator information. And then we let the robot do those tasks that it was trained for in reality. This is the idea of this paper. Incredibly exciting. I think for me, this is certainly one of the futures that I envision, that we have much, much better simulation of reality and that we find ways to extract from that simulation. So what these authors are doing here is they're not just using video data to teach robots how to do stuff and use, let's say, offline reinforcement learning to embed experience. They're also generating a simulated version of reality, which to me is a much better way to get to a world model. Because what is a world model? The world model is our world, okay? How do we model our world? Well, how about we create many, many more multiverses or multi-worlds so that there's a very high likelihood that all those multi-worlds actually embed our world and the potential encounters that a robot might have in our world. And then if it has that, with the experience and with some of the techniques that we discussed in this episode, such as, for example, the embedding experience through offline reinforcement learning, grounding the robot in real physics based on the generated data that it's seen. If we can do all of these things, then we are actually on the path to solving embodied intelligent decision making, which is really what the goal is also for Orange Capital Partners. So to summarize, part 9 of Neurips, we discussed 5 papers here, and they're all kind of in the robotics realm, so that's why we grouped them together. One is learning to influence learning to influence human behavior. So how can humans be influenced by robots in a collaborative game? So think about Optimus influencing another human or another robot which acts like a human. Second, COG, connecting new skills to past experiences of reinforcement learning. This is the paper that really tries to bring in experience and sort of model experience, and then have the robot learn from experience, even maybe if the specific task that it's supposed to do wasn't even in the training data, but with the experience. Think of the drawer that needs to be opened. HIQL, this is hierarchical reinforcement learning with latent extract value from observed states through some sort of latent representation of skills, and create subgoals, which is very good for sparse reward type situations. Grounded decoding, ground the robot in the real world. And then lastly, learning universal policies via text guided video generation. This to me is, again, it's the holy grail of robotics. So how can we simulate reality using video diffusion and then learn from that and embed the learnings into a real decision-making robot that acts in the real world? Thank you.